It is my pleasure to hand the mic over to Dana Gunders, and welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everyone. Do so many of you seriously think about food waste every day? That's kind of amazing. I like to say nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to waste food that day, but it just kind of happens. And that was part of the reason that I wrote the Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook. It is so fun to be here right now. I've been to Google, for various reasons many times, and didn't realize how fun it was going to be standing up and just talking about a book in a kitchen. That's great. Thank you for your time. I know you have a lot of important things to do, so thank you for being here. What I will first say is that I am, unlike many people who probably give these talks, I am not a chef. You may have heard in that bio, and my background is really in science. And so it is kind of curious that I wound up writing what some people call a cookbook. I don't call it a cookbook. I like to say it's like a reference book for what to do in your kitchen when you're standing there holding a slightly wrinkled tomato and don't know what to do with it. But I really got into this, when I was born, actually. My father was raised in the Philippines. My mom grew up in Queens. Her parents ran a lamp store, and we're all very frugal. And so when I was growing up, I would be completely embarrassed by having friends over for dinner. And my mom would take the pasta sauce jar, and she'd put the pasta sauce on the spaghetti, and then she would take water and put it in the jar and then shake up the jar and pour this watery pasta sauce on top just to make sure she got the last little bits out. And then we'd sit down for dinner, and my dad would be sucking the bones of the chicken and slurping as he did it just to make sure he got everything off. And I kid you not, last night I was staying with my parents, and my dad sat down with we celebrated Passover over the weekend, and so we had all this turkey left, and he sat down with a bowl of bones and started sucking them, and my daughter sat next to him and literally started picking up bones and sucking them with it. I was like, oh, this is such a special moment for me. So anyways, that's sort of how it's been bred into me. And I'm sure many of you have similar stories somewhere in your families. But fast forward, and for me it was really an embarrassment and not something I thought much about until I started working on a project in the fruit and vegetable industry with farmers. And the project was to really look at how much water, how much energy it took, how much fertilizer, pesticide, and other resources it took to grow food, and could we help those farmers be a little bit more efficient with what they were doing. And as I started to look into the waste component of that, I was just startled by the numbers that I was reading, and numbers like 40% of food never gets eaten. Around 20% of the water in this country goes to grow food that never gets eaten. And similar numbers around energy, cropland, and things like that. Meanwhile, 1 in 8 people don't have enough food on their tables all year long, or at least some point during the year. And I just thought, wow, here we are trying to get these farmers to be this much more efficient with their water. And yet, no matter how sustainably we grow our food, if we're not actually doing anything with it at the end and we're just throwing it out, it's a huge waste of resources. And that is what really kind of impassioned me on this issue to the point of slight obsession. And I ultimately wrote a report in 2012 that sort of took on the topic. I thought it was just going to be me and my boss who read it, and maybe 1 or 2 people out there. And somehow overnight, CNN picked it up on their breaking news headlines. I think there was nothing going on August 23rd, 2012. And the next night, I found myself on NBC Nightly News talking about the issue, and it's just been wild to see how much it's resonated over the last, well, I guess 7 years now with people. I mean, there's just been this steady stream of interest in it. It's gone from, being ranked as like a trend, a top trend for the food industry in 2013 to something that's really, I would say, become ingrained as a core pillar of what the sustainable food future looks like. And that's fantastic. And we have places like Google taking the issue really seriously, looking across all the capabilities here to think about how do we make the food system more efficient? Because in the end, that's really what this is. It's an efficiency question. And how do we do that? Now, quiz question for you all. Who in the whole supply chain, when you think about farmers, grocers, restaurants, people in their homes, who wastes the most food?
Consumers.
Let's say who? Farms. Raise your hand if you think it's farms. Raise your hand if you think it's restaurants. Raise your hand if you think it's supermarkets. Raise your hand if you think it's people in their homes. Yes, it is. People in their homes make up about 40% of all that 40% of food that's getting wasted. They're a huge contributor, and it's you and me standing there with our overripe avocado that we just, didn't have the same schedule as our plans that week. And so that is kind of what led me to write the book, because I felt like, like I said, nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to waste food, but it's also something we don't really necessarily think about in terms of how we're managing our food. Are we practicing the right strategies so that we don't get to that point where there's a science experiment in the back of our fridge? And how do we think about this? And do we have the right knowledge of how to use food and what can be eaten and how to store food in order to really make sure we're not wasting a lot at home? This is a journey. In fact, when I was writing the book, I tell a little story right at the beginning about being at a coffee shop as I'm writing the book, and there's a salad that comes with the sandwich I ordered, and it is like drenched in dressing to the point that I am just not going to touch it. And I sat there and I was like, oh, this is ironic. I'm going to waste half of this plate while I'm writing a book to tell everybody not to waste food. Isn't that funny? But it really reminded me to sort of let everyone know this is not about perfection. And the great thing is that every time you take a little step to waste less food, it's just like it lowers the demand for food out there just that much. And I think that really gets at what the size of the prize is. So by 2050, it's estimated that we will need up to twice as much food to feed a growing population, and a population that is starting to eat more resource-intensive foods like meat and dairy in other parts of the world. And so where's that food going to come from? Are we going, that's a huge, food already takes up an enormous portion of all of our land. Are we going to cut down more rainforests and grasslands in order to plant more food to get that? Or are we going to just start being more efficient with the food we have and actually using it? And that means, finding ways to really build in a more streamlined system for our food, as well as, looking at how some of the foods that are being grown are being used, such as feed for animals, and are there ways to better use that land to grow foods that we eat directly. So with that, we have a couple fun recipes. And so the book has some strategies, and then it has some recipes, and then it has my favorite section in the back, which is, I call the directory, and it has 85 plus foods, and it gives you information on whether or not you can eat the stalk of a broccoli, or a banana if it has brown spots, or an apple if it gets a little bit mushy or something. So you can look up foods and learn how you should store it, about how long they last, the best way to freeze it, and then little things about what parts are edible and how you know if it's still good. So, but the recipe part is not your average cookbook. It really tries to find things in the kitchen that often do get thrown out and think about ways to use them. So today we're going to learn 2 of those recipes. The first is going to be broccoli stalk salad. Has anyone ever cut off this part of our broccoli and thrown it in the garbage or compost? I see a lot of nodding heads. It's totally edible. And it's delicious. It's sometimes even sweeter than the floret part. And so there's a recipe that we're going to make today called Broccoli Stalk Salad. And there's a couple things to know. One is, depending how strong your teeth are, this part at the bottom is usually pretty tough. So that very part at the bottom, you might want to cut off. The outer skin of the stalk, and I think this is probably why it's sort of gone out of favor, the outer skin can be kind of tough and almost too fibrous to really chew. So when you're making the salad, you do want to peel that off, which I think I'm supposed to do into this bowl. Now, if you are too lazy or too rushed to do that, there's another way you can do it. And that is, you shave it. You lose a little bit more trim, but if you just kind of square it, this is what I do sometimes when my 2-year-old is screaming. You can also just kind of cut do a little square and cut all those outer tough parts off. Or if you're up for the challenge, you can also leave them on and have it be slightly chewier as well. So do that. Not sure where to put the broccoli. I'll just put it in there. And then from there, this is a basic salad. So we're just you can use a peeler and sort of julienne the broccoli into the bowl like that. If you prefer to be a chopper, you can chop it up, into little discs like this. You can sort of do it into lines. It doesn't really matter. And kind of mix it up. But I'll keep doing this for a moment. And the other thing is, sometimes if you only have one or two, like if you just buy a bunch of broccoli and you just have one bunch, then you don't necessarily have enough stalks to make a salad like this. You can just chop it up and throw it into whatever you're doing with the broccoli, right? You're making a stir fry, chop it up, put it in the stir fry. You're just steaming broccoli, just cut it down to those ends, eat those stems. There's really kind of no reason not to. And one other thing I like to do is use it as a substitute for celery, because I find that celery is something that gets sold in a bunch that I don't typically use. But we go through a lot of broccoli in my house. And so instead, I'll substitute broccoli stalk for celery and say a soup recipe or something where it's cooked. It has, not exactly the same flavor, but like I said, I'm not a chef. I'm not looking for perfection in my kitchen all the time. And so that seems to work just fine. Okay, so you do that. And then we're just gonna make a little bit in here. Take these out. The next ingredient is carrots. You might find this a little crazy. I just skip peeling the carrots. Carrots, you wash them, they're roots. They're not, any dirtier on the outside than any other food that you might eat directly. And so you can just put them in and put them right in. It's less to throw out, more salad for everyone. So that is what we do with the carrot. All right. Next we have onions. And cut the onions off what do we do with these onions? Anyone have an idea of what they could do with this part of the onion?
I usually freeze mine to make vegetable stock.
All right, I do the same thing. Freeze them, make vegetable stock. They make a great vegetable stock, especially when you do have a lot of onions in it. Another interesting thing about onions is that the peels can be used to make a dye. You know, it's Easter, and there are actually a lot of natural dye recipes out there using red onions and their peels in particular. So we will do that. Chop it up a bit. Ooh. That in there. And then we can throw in some avocado. Now we'll be talking about avocado for our second recipe today, even more, which is chocolate avocado mousse made with overripe avocados. But for this salad, just chop it in, makes it kind of creamy. And we are set there. Dressing, super basic. You guys are going to be surprised at how delicious this actually is. And though I'm not a cook, I did have some help from some professionals in developing the recipes that are in the book. So I am a cook, I'm not a chef. I like to describe itself. So we have olive oil, red wine vinegar, agave. You can also use honey. We used agave to make sure this would be vegan for any vegans in the room. And some salt, and that's it. There we go. And we mix it up. Gonna put a portion in. Not too much. And just chop a little parsley on top. Parsley that we're using, turns out it comes with some stems, totally edible, totally able to be thrown in if you're putting them in a food processor with anything. I chop them up and just use them in whatever I'm doing. Other people, may just want to use the leaves for something like garnish, but then you can use the stems and stock, or just kind of mixed into any kind of salad. So we'll throw those in on top and mix it up. And we're gonna get to try this in a little bit. It's best if you let it kind of sit for a while, because it sort of softens the broccoli up and just marinates it a little bit. All right, so that's that. Any questions there? Do you guys use broccoli stalks?
Yeah,
Here at
I'm hoping
Google?
she's going to plate that so we can see it. So in our operation, which is a little larger than cooking for 4 or 5 or 6 people at home, we would have large machines like this that would basically do all that prep for us. But I love the point about a lot of vegetables you may not have to peel, and if you are peeling them, a lot of these byproducts, like the onion skin, can be used in so many things. And so we would do the same approach. And so the carrots, most of our chefs don't peel carrots anymore here. We actually we just put out a little piece on this to Googlers that, when you're peeling away the fiber, you're losing some of that nutrient as well as the textural fiber. So leaving it on there, as long as it's cooked in a proper way, in the way that you slice it super thin, it's still going to be super delicious. And so we're doing a lot of the same things you're talking about, but at a much larger scale. So it's great to see.
There's kind of this mantra in the food waste world, if you will, that is around, similar to if you've ever heard of reduce, reuse, recycle. Similar to that, we like to think about it the same for food, but with some nuances. But the first kind of tenet is let's try to not have extra food. Let's try to not have food scraps. Let's try to use it all as food as much as we can. And for the home cook, that is partially about how you shop, actually, because when you're shopping, that's when you're making the commitment to food, right? So if you've planned your meals really well, if you have made a shopping list, if you've actually stuck to your shopping list, that helps you manage your food, because it's really about how you're managing your food, and it helps you not wind up in that place where you just kind of bought something on a whim and didn't get around to using it. And part of it is also kind of being able to use up most of the vegetable. You sometimes hear people talking about nose to tail cooking for meat and trying to use up all of the animal. Well, it's kind of the same thing in fruits and vegetables, is root to stalk, they call it, and really trying to use the whole thing. So things like beets, if you buy them in a bunch, you can actually use those beet greens, cut them up and saute them. It's like a 2-for-1 in my book. I just heard someone the other day say carrot greens are going to be the new parsley, and that you can use those as well. So there's kind of a lot of like little things you can do to just make more of what you're using in the kitchen. And I have to say, this topic has been amazingly resonant with people. That just these like tips and tricks on how do you use stuff, how do you store your food. I have found that it's kind of a topic that keeps giving, and people are really constantly trying to learn and do a little bit better in their kitchen. Just a lot of curiosity around it. All right, so let's go forth and make some chocolate mousse using overripe avocados. Okay, we're gonna move over here. I would like to pass this around real quickly, actually. We'll do one this way, one this way. Check out the avocados we're gonna use today. And tell me what you would normally do with an avocado like that. If anyone says guacamole, first of all, I don't believe you. Second of all, I think that guacamole using overripe avocados tastes a little funny. I mean, that's the thing about overripe avocados, right? Like they have a little bit of a funky taste. And the other thing about avocados is they're really hard to like nail in that perfect window of time, right? You buy it, it's still hard, and then you do stuff like live your life, and and then you come home one day and you're like, I missed it. Has anyone ever had that happen to them? On their $2 avocado or $1.50 they paid, right? So when I discovered this recipe, I was so excited about it because, well, you're gonna see, it's amazing in how well it hides that kind of funky, overripe flavor of avocados. Now, are any of you frightened to eat this? All right, bold people here. But a lot of people are. So a lot of people, would pick up an avocado that is this mushy and feel like, this is bad, right? This is bad, and I don't know if I can eat it. And I think what's behind that is it going to make me sick? So this is actually, I think, a really important thing to understand when you're in your kitchen, because we all have that moment where we're like, can I eat this? Is this going to make me sick? And here's what I want to tell you about that. People get sick from food because it's contaminated. So you hear about people getting sick from E. coli, from salmonella, from listeria, right? Those are all what they call foodborne illnesses from pathogens, which are bacteria, that get on the food before it's entered your mouth. Oftentimes it gets on that food from at the farm, at the processing plant, somewhere along the way before it's gotten to you. What makes food old and what makes it decay are totally different bacteria. And actually a lot of enzymes, which are not bacteria, but sort of natural, like protein, or I don't know what enzymes are, but natural things in the food that break it down. Those bacteria and enzymes that break food down are not what make people sick. And so there's kind of this mass fear around old food in our country that is leading a lot of food to be thrown out. And when you look at the date labels, we see this happening around the dates that are on food. And you'll see, best by, sell by, use by dates. Does anyone want to take a guess at what those mean? Yes.
Isn't it when the store has to sell it by, and then it has to go off their shelves, but it doesn't mean you can't use it at home for a longer period of time?
Okay, that's good. So when the store has to sell it by, to get it, to get it home to you with enough time so that you can actually use it and have a good experience with it. That is true for sell-by dates that actually say the word sell-by on them. And then we see others that say use by and best by. Who wants to take a guess? I saw a hand over here. So it turns out that use by and best by dates, first of all, none of them are federally regulated. The only product that is federally regulated around these dates is infant formula, which has a use by date because the nutrients can decline over time and they want to make sure that the infants are getting the appropriate nutrients. Other than that, those dates are actually about their manufacturer's estimates, so their best guess at when the product is at its top quality or freshness. And so, if you have a yogurt, for instance, the way a company might come to that date is to take a bunch of people, consumers, focus group, put them in a room and give them, 5-day-old yogurt, 8-day-old yogurt, 10-day-old yogurt, and say, okay, rate this on a scale of 1 to 10. And as the yogurt gets older, when the score drops to below a 7, let's just say, that's the date that they do it on, right? And so it's really about, is the texture, or sometimes does the texture change? But those dates are actually not meant to indicate the food's safety or to tell you that it's bad or should be thrown out on that date. The vast majority of them are really just trying to tell you, like, this product is at its top quality and I, the brand, stand by it. And so, one of the things that I really try to dispel out there is the fear of food that kind of exists about it going bad. And one of the ways we do that is to make delicious overripe avocado mousse. So hopefully I have not scared you. Uh-oh. Might need, there we go, we got it open. And what's awesome is this is super easy. If you only have one overripe avocado, this is with 2, you can actually just sort of do this in a bowl if you don't have a food processor and just mash it up, and that actually works as well. So take that out, scoop it in. There's some neat products coming out that are natural coatings, and they've started with avocados to actually make the life during which it's ripe, that period of time for which it's ripe, longer, which I find fascinating. And it sort of just slows the ripening process down a little bit. All right, take that out. And then all we're gonna add is some cocoa powder. Agave syrup. You can also use maple syrup or honey. Honey kind of changes the flavor a little bit. Salt. Vanilla. And milk of your choice, be it cow or some kind of alternative. This is pea milk that we are using today. Keep it vegan for anyone who is. Ooh. Put it in there. When I did my book tour, I tried to make this, in a few different places, and We had one that was quite a large audience, and we had to find like 50 overripe avocados, which is not an easy thing to do, because no one will we had to go to like 5 different stores and beg them to give us their overripe avocados. It's kind of funny. Let's see if that's done it. Yep, I think we're there. All right. And there you have it. We'll get to try this soon. Delicious avocado mousse. Also, what I love about this recipe is it's vegan. It is also way healthier than throwing the usual butter and cream that you would into a chocolate mousse. So it's kind of an added benefit.
Awesome.
All right.
We've done some taste tests with some chefs on this dish before, and many of them couldn't tell that it didn't have the cream in it. They knew something was different, but they couldn't tell that they didn't have the actual fat, because the avocado did a great job of it.
Yeah.
It's a really good dish.
Cool. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Can't wait for you guys to try it. And we are actually going to try it with strawberries today. And what I want you to know, should you care to try this, is that the green parts on strawberries, this was like the very last fact I had to verify before sending my book to the publisher. And I did so by talking to the California Strawberry Commission. And the green parts on strawberries are in fact edible. They're a little bit chewy, but I welcome you to try it. Their texture is not ideal for eating. But I think it comes very much in handy when you're making smoothies, because it takes a lot of work. If you're doing it with fresh strawberries, you can just throw them in, blend it, and you won't notice the difference. Get a little extra vitamins in there for you. So, yeah.
Awesome. So first off, big round of applause. We're not done yet. So the chefs in the back are putting both of these dishes together for everyone to sample. So my first question is, you have obviously thought this through. You wrote a book on it. You've got all the tips in your head. How do you bring others along? So say you've got a friend, a spouse that just doesn't think about it. What's been successful? And maybe toddlers aren't the best example, because you can kind of mold them. But what's been the best example in trying to get others to think differently about what you're so passionate about?
That's a great question. What I have found is that people naturally don't want to see food going to waste. Like there's something instinctive or something. And so when I first got into this topic, I was really surprised by how much it was resonating with everyone. And then I just kind of tuned into that, right? That people don't like food to get wasted. However, so getting them to care is not that hard, but getting them to notice is what's really hard, because we are not wasting 40% of our food in one big chunk over here, and you're not throwing all your food out in your home one time in the year, right? It's happening every day in little bits. It's scraping your plate off. It's, not touching the potatoes on a breakfast platter that you go out to for brunch. It's, just kind of cleaning out your fridge here and there. And so it's really hard to see. And so what I think the two things that have worked, one is really talking about this food safety issue and getting people to understand and be a little less afraid of their food by understanding, kind of the science behind food, right? Like what really is going on there that could make you sick or not, and therefore empowering people to cook and try things that they maybe didn't try before. I think the other is I have found that it is kind of entering the ethos a little bit, right? And I think we're really going to win when it is very uncool to throw food out. Like that to me is going to be the big engine. So I see it in my life, since you asked about my life, because people are afraid to eat dinner with me. Because they sit down at dinner, they don't think about it before, and then they sit down and they're like, oh, like, am I going to have to finish this plate of food because I'm having dinner with you? And so I see that cultural, that sort of like social pressure that I think is actually really effective on this topic. And I always say, hey, I'm not the food police. We'll get a leftover box. It's okay. And and then we kind of go back to like being a journey, right? And just I think what's really helpful on this topic is seeing the fun in it, because there's a lot of fun and learning new tips and tricks and just becoming more familiar with food. And so I think this like finding the fun in it keeps it alive.
I like your example a lot better. In a lot of kitchens, not at Google, but at a lot of kitchens, you are first learned how to combat food waste when the chef walks up, takes the garbage can that you'd put all your food trimmings in, dumps it upside down, and makes an example of you. It happened to me once. I was very young. It's stuck.
I can't tell you how many people come up to me and go, "Oh my God, I thought of you the other day. I had this like almost rotten tomato and I threw it in a pasta sauce." I'm like, "Great, I'm like the queen of rotten tomatoes here." That's actually like kind of
awesome. So we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Love to hear anything that's on your mind. If you don't have questions, I might have questions for you. And the question might be, what is the one tip that you do at home that's been successful in combating waste? Like you're going to the big box stores less often and shopping more often per week, things like that. So if you don't have questions, I might come back to you. So raise the hands. Yes.
Yeah, maybe you can answer that too, Scott. So the question was, what works better? Is it sort of letting people serve themselves or pre-plating food in terms of waste? I think the closer we can get to letting people choose what, like customize their plate for what they want, the better we're doing in terms of, the less likely it is that they'll waste something. So in a home setting, I think certainly letting people serve themselves can be better. I know there's been kind of a lot of thought behind this at Google, so I'll let you answer it on
Yeah,
Google
it's a
side.
really complicated question, and when we look at a lot of the things that we focus on, there's food waste at Google, there's line throughput, there's portion control, there's balance, there's all of these. We find it quicker and more effective and overall appealing to the users if we actually plate the food, but the caveat of having a conversation to see, would you like more or less of this or that? And we can have the conversation, but to Dana's point, if you can ensure that people are only getting what they want in the exact amounts, that's great. Part of the problem here that we have is there's so much variety. The more you see, the more you might want to put on your plate, and then you get to the point of there might be too many offerings. So I would say another great tip is really be mindful of how much variety you have, because the more you offer, the more people want to try all the good stuff, right?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I find, I think when you really like peel back the layers on this topic, you get down to a few themes. One is portions, right? So quick pop quiz here. How much have the calories in the average cookie increased since the 1980s? Anyone? Doubled, tripled, more? They've actually quadrupled in calories, the average cookie. And the average Caesar salad has doubled. So our portions have increased tremendously. We have this mindset that quantity is value as a general thing in our country. And that is leading to waste. So portions, but then variety is another thing. We really want choice. And there's a PhD student who did some interviewing of people, and she said, "Hey, if you brought eggs home from the store and you dropped them on the floor, how would that make you feel, right? As you're putting them away." And then she said, and of course everybody felt very upset about that. And then she said, "Hey, if you don't drop on the floor, you put them in your refrigerator, and 4 weeks later you get to them and they're not good anymore, but you haven't eaten any of them. How do you feel about that?" And they felt less bad on the scale, right? And I think that's really fascinating, because I think behind that is something around having the option to eat something. So I think we want to have our options when we want them, and we also want a lot of them. And that's true in our home, so we have more food in our fridge than we actually are eating. That's also true in a grocery store, where they have to carry 50,000 different items so that we can walk in and pick, which kind of cereal we want out of an entire aisle, right? And it's also true in restaurants, where there's kind of a pressure to have a pretty big variety of foods and big menu, and that makes it a little bit harder to do all their stocking and inventory and things. So I do think the variety and choice thing is an underlying driver.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah, great question. The question was, are there any efforts to reduce portion sizes, given that we're not that active, we don't actually need to eat as much as a lot of people are eating in the country. There is a lot of attention to that. particularly because of the health components of it, right? The increased calories and all the health effects of that. And here in California, there's a law around calorie posting, like posting the calories. You may have seen in different like fast food restaurants or restaurants of a certain size need to post their calories. That's been one kind of policy effort towards that. I think there's a lot more we could do, is what I could say. There are people thinking about it. We have dietary guidelines about it. But in terms of like what impacts you when you pick up a plate and put food on it and how much you eat, I think there's actually some innovative stuff that could be done to sort of change habits in place. Yeah.
So real quickly, what we've been doing for several years, probably going on for close to 5 years through this current system, but we were doing it previously, is we have a system that we partnered with. It's called Lean Path. And imagine a scale and a camera that is in your kitchen that every time you have some trim left over, you can take a picture of it. And what that data does is it allows you to look at over the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, whatever, through the 70 plus cafes we have in the Bay Area. There's a lot of food. Where we have potential opportunities for overproduction. Are we making too much? Are we buying things that maybe could come in already peeled, so we're not throwing that into compost? And all of that data over time allows us to basically menu smarter, so that we're able to do a repetitive cycle menu, which means that in any cafe you're in, that menu will run for probably about 3 weeks, and then it will repeat. And so the chefs now have a rhythm, knowing that every 3 weeks they're going to make that recipe a little bit better, a little bit tastier, and they're going to be a little less wasteful. And happy to say that the Bay Area for the last probably 3/4 has achieved all of their KPIs, and they just won the Sustainability Award at Environment Day based off of their efforts around food waste. We have a long way to go in other aspects of Google. Imagine all the stuff that we take back to our desks and things that don't make it to the cafe waste stream. But overall, doing an amazing job. And it's folks like Dana and people like you that are asking those questions. We all need to continue to think that through, because it's not just a waste of the product, but it's a waste of the time of all of our chefs that have made that food that we then end up throwing out for all of the right reasons at that moment. So, good question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. The question was around schools, and that there's a lot of schools are complicated, right? Schools, because of the federal funding that happens for school lunch, there's like a requirement to at least offer a certain amount of food and certain different quantities, and different schools kind of interpret that a little bit differently. There are a lot of people thinking about this, right? So what you have kids going through the school lunch line. They take a milk. They literally don't touch that carton of milk. They feel like they have to take it, or the lunch lady is telling them they have to take it, and then it goes straight in the garbage because they're not even allowed to share it with anybody else. And at that very same school, you have like these schools that have 80-90% students who are low income enough to be qualifying for the free and reduced lunch programs, and some of them, likely don't necessarily have a steady supply of food to their tables all year. So it's a real conundrum, and so schools are looking. I'll tell you what's happening on that front is that there's a lot of push for schools to understand they only have to offer the food, they don't actually have to serve it. So students don't always have to take all of the food, they have to be given the opportunity. There's a lot of work on share tables, so places where students can, if they do take food, they can, and they don't touch it, they can put it on that table and others can take it. And there's some work on how do you send food home with students at the end of the day or week that could help with that as well. So yeah, it's a real opportunity area, I think.
Huge, again, round of applause for Dana. Thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you for having me.